The valet's laughter echoed through the pristine entrance of the Ritz-Carlton as he stared at the beat-up 1952 Chevrolet pickup truck pulling into the circular drive. "You've got to be kidding me," Jason muttered to his co-worker, barely containing his snickers. "Look at this piece of junk rolling up like it belongs here." Behind the wheel sat Harold Westbrook, a 78-year-old man whose weathered hands gripped the steering wheel with quiet dignity. His simple flannel shirt and worn jeans stood in stark contrast to the luxury vehicles surrounding him. But what happened next shocked everyone who witnessed it, and by the end of this story, that young valet would learn the most expensive lesson of his career. Harold slowly climbed out of his truck, his movements deliberate despite his age. The parking attendants exchanged glances, their professional smiles barely masking their judgment. "Sir," Jason approached with barely concealed condescension, "I'm not sure this vehicle meets our establishment standards. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the motel down the street." Harold looked up at the young man, his steel blue eyes holding decades of wisdom and pain. "My granddaughter is getting married in your ballroom tomorrow," he said quietly. "I have a reservation." Jason's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "A reservation? Here?" He glanced at his smartphone, scrolling through the guest list with theatrical skepticism. "What's the name?" "Harold Westbrook." The name appeared on the screen, and Jason's confidence wavered for just a moment before his arrogance returned. "Well, Mr. Westbrook, even if you do have a reservation, I'm afraid we can't have this vehicle displayed in front of our establishment. Our other guests might find it disturbing." Little did Jason know that the man standing before him had more wealth in his back pocket than the valet would see in 10 lifetimes, and the truck he was dismissing so carelessly held secrets that would make international headlines within hours. Harold reached into his worn leather wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. "Here's your tip in advance," he said calmly. "Please take good care of her. She's been in my family for 70 years. Jason snatched the money, his attitude softening slightly at the generous tip, though his disdain remained obvious. "Sure thing, Pops. I'll park it way in the back where nobody can see it." He smirked to his co-workers as Harold walked toward the hotel entrance, his overnight bag slung over his shoulder. As Harold disappeared through the golden doors, Jason climbed into the old Chevrolet, immediately wrinkling his nose at the smell of aged leather and motor oil. The interior was immaculate despite its age, with hand-stitched seat covers and a dashboard polished to perfection. But what caught his attention was something glinting in the glove compartment that had fallen partially open during his rough handling of the door. "What's this old man hiding in here?" Jason wondered aloud, his curiosity getting the better of him. This decision would change everything, though he had no way of knowing it yet. Meanwhile, in the hotel's marble lobby, Harold checked in with the same quiet dignity he'd shown outside. The desk clerk, having witnessed the parking lot incident through the floor-to-ceiling windows, treated him with cool professionalism, rather than the warmth typically reserved for wedding party guests. "Your room is on the 14th floor, Mr. Westbrook," she said, sliding the key card across the granite counter. "The rehearsal dinner begins at 7 in the Astor Ballroom." Harold nodded his thanks and headed toward the elevator, unaware that 3 floors below in the parking garage, a young valet was about to make a discovery that would turn his world upside down. But the real shock was still coming, and it would shake the very foundations of everything everyone thought they knew about the quiet old man and his supposedly worthless truck. The silence in the restaurant's parking lot was deafening as Marcus stood frozen, staring at the weathered pickup truck he'd just dismissed as worthless junk. The elderly man, Harold, watched him with those knowing eyes, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth as if he'd been waiting for this exact moment his entire life. "You seem surprised, son," Harold said quietly, his voice carrying decades of stories. "Most people are when they really look at her for the first time." Marcus stepped closer to the truck, his cocky demeanor evaporating like morning mist. What he'd initially seen as rust and wear marks now revealed themselves as something entirely different. The patina wasn't decay, it was history, carefully preserved. The dents weren't neglect, they were battle scars from adventures most people could only dream of. "This isn't just any pickup truck, is it?" Marcus whispered. running his fingers along the weathered chrome bumper. Harold chuckled, pulling out an old leather wallet from his jacket pocket. "Tell me, Marcus, that's your name, right? What do you see when you look at this truck now?" The young valet circled the vehicle slowly, his eyes picking up details he'd completely missed in his rush to judge. The headlights weren't cloudy with age. They were crystal clear, recently maintained. The tires weren't worn. They were high-end off-road treads that probably cost more than his monthly salary. And that engine sound he'd heard earlier wasn't the rattle of an old motor. It was the purr of something powerful, something rare. "The paint job," Marcus said suddenly, pointing to what he'd thought was faded blue. "It's not weathered at all, is it? It's intentional." "Very good," Harold nodded approvingly. "This here is what we call a survivor finish. Original paint from 1967, never touched by a restoration brush. Do you know how rare that is?" But Marcus was already moving to the front grille, his heart racing as recognition began to dawn. "Wait a minute. This emblem," he traced the chrome letters with trembling fingers. "This isn't just any Ford." Harold's smile widened. "Keep looking, son. You're getting warmer." The valet dropped to his knees, peering under the front bumper. And what he saw made his blood run cold. Racing numbers, faded but still visible, painted on the undercarriage. Professional roll cage welds visible through the rear window. And then, the detail that made his world tilt on its axis. A small, almost invisible plaque riveted to the driver's side door frame. "Oh my God," Marcus breathed, struggling to his feet. This can't be real." "What do you think it is?" Harold asked, clearly enjoying every second of the revelation. Marcus's voice cracked as he spoke. "The registration numbers, the cage work, the engine modifications." He looked up at Harold with wide, disbelieving eyes. "This is a genuine NASCAR truck, isn't it? From the old racing series?" Harold's eyes twinkled with something between pride and mischief. "Getting closer, but you're still not seeing the whole picture." He walked to the tailgate and lowered it with a smooth motion that spoke of perfect maintenance. Inside the truck bed was a custom-fitted aluminum case, locked and weathered from years of travel. "Every great story has layers, Marcus. And this old truck, she's got more layers than you can imagine." Harold's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "What I'm about to show you will change everything you think you know about value, about respect, and about the stories that objects carry." He reached for the case's combination lock, his weathered fingers moving with practiced precision. "But first, I need to know, are you ready to learn why some things are worth more than money can measure?" The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo through the empty parking lot, and Marcus realized his entire world was about to change forever. The mechanic's words hung in the air like smoke from an old campfire. "This ain't just any truck, Harold. This here's a piece of American history." The old man's weathered hands trembled slightly as he ran them along the faded paint, memories flooding back like a dam bursting open. "You see," Harold began, his voice gaining strength, "this truck belonged to my grandfather first. He bought it brand new in 1954 with money he'd saved working double shifts at the steel mill." The valet, Danny, found himself drawn closer despite his earlier dismissal, something in the old man's tone commanding attention. Harold opened the driver's door with reverence, revealing an interior that told 1,000 stories. Grandpa drove this beauty cross-country 17 times, hauling everything from furniture for families moving west to medical supplies. During natural disasters, never asked for a dime in return when folks were hurting. But Danny noticed something that made his smirk return. "Look, Pops, I appreciate the family history and all, but sentimental value doesn't pay the bills. This thing's still just an old—" "Hold up there, son." The mechanic's gruff voice cut through Danny's dismissal. "You might want to hear the rest before you go running your mouth." He gestured toward the engine bay. "Harold, show him what's under that hood." The elderly man's eyes sparkled with something Danny hadn't seen before, not just pride, but anticipation. As Harold lifted the hood, the late afternoon sun caught something that made everyone present take a sharp breath. Instead of a rusty, worn-out engine, there sat a gleaming powerhouse that clearly didn't belong to any ordinary 1954 pickup. "Sweet mother of pearl," whispered one of the other customers who'd wandered over to see what the commotion was about. "Is that a—" 427 big block racing engine. Harold finished with a grin that transformed his entire face. Completely rebuilt from the ground up. 0 to 60 in 4.2 seconds, and she'll do a quarter mile in 12 flat. He patted the engine block like it was a beloved pet. But that's not even the half of it. Danny's jaw dropped as he processed what he was seeing. This wasn't just any engine. It was the kind of powerhouse that NASCAR dreams were made of. The chrome headers alone probably cost more than Danny made in 3 months. Now hold on, Danny stammered, his earlier confidence evaporating faster than morning dew. How does an old man like you afford something like this? You telling me you dropped 50 grand on an engine for this rust bucket? The question hung in the air, and Harold's expression shifted to something unreadable. The small crowd that had gathered, mechanics, customers, even the shop owner, all leaned in closer, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. 50,000, Harold chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Son, you're not even close. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. This engine came from my racing days. Built it myself back when I was tearing up tracks from here to Talladega. The revelation hit like lightning. This wasn't just some random grandfather with a hobby truck. The pieces of a much larger puzzle were starting to fall into place, and Danny suddenly realized he might have made the biggest mistake of his life. But as Harold began to unfold that mysterious paper, his hands shaking with emotion, everyone present sensed they were about to learn something that would change everything they thought. They knew about the humble man and his extraordinary truck. The museum curator's hands trembled as she lifted the worn leather journal from beneath the driver's seat, her breath catching in her throat. "Dear God," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the restaurant's air conditioning. "This belongs in the Smithsonian." Marcus felt his world tilt on its axis. The woman's face had gone completely pale as she carefully opened the journal, revealing pages of handwritten notes, sketches, and what appeared to be government stamps. What is that?" he managed to ask. "This is a field journal, Doctor," Sarah Martinez explained, her professional composure cracking with excitement. These were standard issue for automotive engineers working on classified military projects during World War II. But this one, she turned another page, her eyes widening. This one belonged to someone very special. Harold watched the scene unfold with a knowing smile, his weathered hands folded calmly in his lap. The valet who had mocked his truck just hours earlier now stood frozen behind him, his earlier arrogance replaced by growing confusion and dread. "Doctor." Martinez looked up from the journal, her gaze shifting between Harold and the truck. "Sir, do you have any idea who owned this vehicle before you?" "My grandfather," Harold replied simply. "Harold Benjamin Kaufman. He worked for Ford during the war, but he never talked much about what he did there. Said it was classified." The curator's face went white as she flipped to the front page of the journal. There, in faded ink, was a signature that made her hands shake even more. "Marcus," she said urgently, "do you know who Harold Kaufman was? But before you think this story is just about some old war memorabilia, what Doctor Martinez discovered next would change everything. Anyone thought they knew about American automotive history. She carefully turned to a page marked with an official government seal. Her voice cracked as she read aloud, "Project designation, Thunderbolt. Classification level, top secret. Principal engineer, H.B. Kaufman." She looked up at Harold with tears in her eyes. "Your grandfather didn't just work for Ford during the war. He was the lead engineer on one of the most classified military vehicle projects in American history." Marcus felt sick to his stomach. The weight of his earlier behavior crashed down on him like a physical force. "I don't understand," he stammered. "The Thunderbolt project, Doctor," Martinez explained, her voice gaining strength as she processed the magnitude of the discovery, "was a top-secret initiative to develop the fastest, most durable military transport vehicles ever built. Only 12 prototype trucks were ever manufactured. After the war, they were supposed to be destroyed." She gestured toward Harold's pickup. "This is one of those 12. It's not just a collector's item, it's a piece of classified American military history." The restaurant had gone completely silent. Other diners had begun to gather round, sensing something extraordinary was happening. Harold's granddaughter Emma squeezed his arm. tears streaming down her face as she finally understood why her grandfather had been so protective of that old truck. The engine alone, Dr. Martinez continued, contains innovations that weren't officially invented until the 1960s. The metallurgy of the frame uses techniques that are still considered advanced today. This vehicle represents technology that was decades ahead of its time. But what she was about to reveal next would prove that the truck's historical value was nothing compared to its worth on today's market, a number so staggering that it would forever change how Marcus viewed the thin line between appearance and reality. The silence in the hotel lobby stretches for what feels like an eternity as Marcus processes what Harold has just revealed. The elderly man stands quietly beside his legendary F1 Lightning pickup truck, watching as the young Valet's entire worldview crumbles and rebuilds itself in real time. I don't understand, Marcus whispers, his voice barely audible above the gentle hum of the hotel's air conditioning. You're telling me this truck is worth over $2 million? More than most people's houses? Harold nods gently, his weathered hand resting on the truck's pristine fender. The Barrett-Jackson auction house appraised it last year. They called it the holy grail of Ford performance vehicles. But Marcus, its real value isn't in the money, it's in what it represents. The hotel manager, Sarah, approaches with a mixture of awe and professional concern. She's been listening to the entire conversation, and her face shows the weight of her employee's actions. Mr. Thompson, I cannot adequately express how sorry I am for the way you were treated today. But Harold raises his hand with a kind smile. Sarah, please. This young man just learned one of life's most important lessons. That's worth more than any apology. Marcus's eyes fill with tears as the full impact of his assumptions hits him. Sir, I looked at you and saw someone who didn't belong here. I saw your clothes, your truck, and I made up my mind about who you were without knowing anything about your story. And what did you see? Harold asks gently, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. I saw someone poor, someone who probably couldn't afford to be here. I assumed you were taking advantage of the hotel's hospitality. Marcus wipes his eyes with the back of his hand. I was so wrong about everything. Harold walks around to the passenger side of the F1 Lightning and opens the door. Inside, Marcus can see the immaculate interior, hand-stitched leather seats, carbon fiber trim, and gauges that look like they belong in a fighter jet. But what catches his attention is a framed photograph on the dashboard. That's my grandson, Tommy, Harold explains. He's 16 now, obsessed with cars just like I was at his age. This truck isn't just a collector's item, it's his inheritance. But more than that, it's a reminder that dreams can come true if you work hard enough and never give up. The elderly man's voice takes on a distant quality as he continues. I bought this truck new in 1999 with money from my first successful business venture. I'd started a small automotive parts company in my garage, working nights while I held down a day job at the factory. My wife Betty used to bring me sandwiches at midnight while I filled orders by hand. Marcus listens intently, hanging on every word. People told me I was crazy to spend that kind of money on a truck. Even Betty thought I'd lost my mind. But I knew something they didn't. Ford was only making 4,000 of these Lightning models, and the performance package I ordered was going to be rarer than hen's teeth. I wasn't buying a truck. I was making an investment in the future. The hotel lobby has gradually filled with curious onlookers, guests, and staff members drawn by the sight of the stunning vehicle and the compelling conversation taking place beside it. Harold doesn't seem to notice or mind the attention. Over the years, I kept this truck in climate-controlled storage, only driving it on special occasions. I maintained every bolt, every gasket, every piece of trim, not because I'm obsessive, but because I understood its potential value, both monetary and sentimental. Sarah steps forward, her professional demeanor softened by genuine emotion. Mr. Thompson, you've been staying with us for 3 years now, and I had no idea about any of this. You've never once mentioned your collection or your business success. Harold chuckles softly. Why would I? True wealth isn't about what you own or how much money you have in the bank. It's about the relationships you build, the kindness you show others, and the legacy you leave behind. He turns to Marcus with compassionate eyes. Son, you made an assumption today that hurt both of us. But assumptions are just opportunities to learn something new about ourselves and the world around us. Marcus straightens his shoulders, wiping away the last of his tears. Mr. Thompson, I want to learn. I want to be better than the person I was 30 minutes ago. Then you're already on the right path, Harold responds warmly. The most successful people I know are the ones who can admit when they're wrong and ask how they can improve. The elderly man reaches into his pocket and pulls out a worn business card. This is my company, Thompson Automotive Solutions. We've grown from that little garage operation to a nationwide distributor. We're always looking for young people with the right attitude and work ethic. Marcus takes the card with trembling hands, reading the embossed lettering. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity, Harold corrects. What you do with it is entirely up to you. But I see potential in someone who can acknowledge their mistakes and genuinely want to change. The transformation in Marcus is visible to everyone watching. His posture has changed, his expression has shifted from shame to determination, and his eyes hold a new understanding of the world and his place in it. I won't let you down, sir, Marcus says with conviction that surprises even himself. Harold extends his weathered hand for a firm handshake. I believe you won't. As the crowd begins to disperse and the normal rhythm of the hotel lobby resumes, Harold climbs into his $2 million pickup truck. The engine roars to life with a deep, powerful rumble that commands respect from everyone within earshot. Rolling down the window, he calls out one final piece of wisdom. Remember, Marcus, never judge a book by its cover, and never underestimate the power of treating every person you meet with dignity and respect. You never know who might change your life. The F1 Lightning pulls away from the hotel entrance, leaving behind a young man forever changed by an encounter with someone he'd completely misjudged. Marcus watches until the taillights disappear around the corner, clutching the business card that represents his second chance and new beginning.